The film opens with a boy named Thomas and his father, Slager, a butcher. Meanwhile, Thomas is still in school. He enjoys watching the news on television and often retreats to a small forest near the settlement. Unlike Thomas, Slager spends more time at home. He is annoyed by his wife, Martha, who always spends her time praying and always refuses his invitations to be intimate. On the other hand, there is a couple named Yeager and Elizabeth, similar to Martha and Slager, except that Yeager always rejects Elizabeth's advances. Yeager is a security guard in the town and is an expert marksman. In the forest, there is a postman named Pledge. He has a bad habit of reading letters before delivering them to their destinations. Shortly, Pledge meets Thomas and leaves a letter for his mother. At home, Thomas hands the letter to his mother, who tells him it's from her friend Karen. However, Slager seemed doubtful. He asked Martha to read the letter, but she refused. Slager grew increasingly suspicious and convinced the letter was from another man. That evening, when Thomas wanted a drink, he caught a strange woman in his kitchen. The woman ate the food there before quietly escaping. Slager's desire for intimacy had long been pent up, but Martha still refused his request. With no other option, Slager secretly invited his own employee to indulge his desire for intimacy. However, as soon as she began, the woman fled in fear and headed for the forest. A few days later, all the villagers went to church for worship, including Thomas and his mother. However, Slager didn't join them, preferring to stay home. When Martha returned, Slager again begged her to comply, but Martha refused, as usual. Meanwhile, Thomas returned several times to see the woman who had entered his house, named Lisa. As the days went by, they saw each other more often and became closer. Slager himself grew increasingly desperate for his wife. Their marital relationship became increasingly strained. That day, they argued throughout the village, becoming a spectacle for the local residents. Slager didn't know what to do. He still loved Martha, but she wouldn't comply with his demands. One day, two missionaries arrived carrying various exhibits. One of them was a man named Neger, from the interior of the Congo. He was used as an educational object for school children due to his strong traditional culture. Thomas felt sorry for Neger, and with the help of a postman, he released him and hid him in his house. Yeager was truly worried that Neger's disappearance would pose a threat to the local population, and he continued to search for Neger. Upon returning home, Elizabeth again engaged Yeager in a game of hide-and-seek. The ploy worked. Yeager finally agreed to be intimate with her. Unfortunately, the encounter was short-lived, as Yeager's focus was distracted by the smoke coming from the forest. The smoke was coming from Neger, but fortunately, when Yeager arrived, Neger managed to hide. The following night, Lisa returned to Thomas's house. She entered his room and asked him to make out. The next morning, Elizabeth tried another way to seduce Yeager, but was still rejected. Yeager preferred to search for Neger in the forest. Yeager roamed the forest with his rifle. When he spotted his prey, he immediately showed off his skills. Unfortunately, this time, he missed his target and killed Lisa. Yeager didn't want anyone to know about this and tried to hide Lisa. Elsewhere, Elizabeth, desperate for Yeager, decided to go to Slager's shop. Without a word, she entered a room, revealing that her intention was to invite Slager to make out. Since that incident, Yeager has been spending more time in the forest. He forbade anyone from entering, including Thomas, afraid his secret would be discovered. However, Neger didn't know what Yeager was up to. Neger then ambushed Yeager and blinded him. Meanwhile, Martha fell ill and was bedridden. Slager was angry that so many people were watching his wife from the window. Even though he could no longer see, Yeager still wanted to work as a security guard. Elizabeth tried to stop him, but her efforts failed. Elizabeth, who could no longer stand Yeager's attitude, chose to leave the settlement. Her departure leaves Slager without a friend to flirt with. He tries to find someone else, targeting his new employee. In the woods, Slager carries out his actions, but unfortunately, Thomas witnesses his actions. A few days later, a priest comes to visit Martha. It is then discovered that the letter Martha received was actually from the priest. Slager accuses the priest of causing his wife's change in behavior. The situation becomes even more chaotic. Neger finds Jagger frozen in the woods, stressed by Elizabeth's abandonment. Meanwhile, Thomas finds Lisa on a frozen lake. She can only cry, but at least she still has the postman as a close friend. Finally, the film ends.